some pretty interesting wines. So, you know, I'm sure that they had ferment there, but other stuff I can't remember.
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, there's a lot of these crazy, like almost like spellings and whatnot too. So it can be like very almost like intimidating, you know. We had like a Mideastern portfolio event at Cork Buzz, and then they leave all the wines out that were just open for the tasting.
Uh-huh.
And then you're trying, at first glance, when you're not familiar with this stuff, even like a couple years ago, we're like, what the heck am I looking at? And you're trying to organize everything, and it's just like it takes a moment. Like, oh, okay, this is the region. Okay.
Oh, right. Get your bearings. I see what you mean.
Exactly. Cool, everybody. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome all. 6:32. We had about 18 signed up for our Eastern Europe vacation trip. Maybe National Lampoons and Ancient Wine inspired for tonight. Cool. We're pretty much mostly everybody is here. Just gonna turn this. We got 16. Okay, cool. You guys, it's just that time. I'll mute everybody here just to block the background noise. Take this off. And I'll reshare the screen or just put it up on the slideshow.
Once you started.
So grab your Hungarian, your Romanian, your Bulgarian, your Georgian wines, and we'll get started. Yeah, it's kind of nice as a smaller group. Amber's been working her tail off in the city, so she's not going to be able to sit in class tonight. It's my coworker, if you're new to class, who will help me out with chat sometimes. But I'm going to bring up chat on the phone. Or please use it as a way to talk amongst yourselves, ask some questions. I'm never very good at it, but I'll try to make some stops along the way just to see what people might be, see what the questions are. And it's always kind of fun, really fun. Let's if you're drinking something from Eastern Europe tonight, Georgia or wherever you are, again, we don't even know if we can call Georgia Eastern Europe or not. It's not usually lumped in that category when we're studying these areas, but we're going to highlight it a little bit. But to put what you're drinking on chat could be really interesting, seeing if you could identify the varietal. And then Ezhizhertiko, so we're in Greece, awesome, Nemia. Also had a Fetiesca Negra from Romania. Interesting, because I don't think I've ever had a Fetiesca Negra from Romania. Awesome. One of the more prized reds of Romania. That's cool. But as we're always being introduced to more and more these days, it's an area that will pop up on wine lists or even just be available through just vendors in the city. Even in New York, Tokai and a Fetiesca Negra, sweet. Really cool stuff. All right, so I won't try to daily take too much time. We'll go ahead and get started. Here's our friendly Hungarian winemaker here, where he's got his Butonyos and his botrytis affected grapes on his back. And off we go on our vacation. Okay, how this is gonna work, you guys, we're really just gonna cover like these foundations with most like regional studies with wine classes, where we look at history, geography, climate, some of the wine laws, common varietals, maybe winemaking techniques. But we're really just gonna highlight those things as we go from country to country. And I'm gonna bring myself up maybe a second more. I'm in a different room where it might be a little echo, but I think everybody can hear me okay and it's not too weird, but just, I don't know. Unmute yourself at any time if it gets to be a little too much or something. But this is how it's gonna go. We're gonna start in Hungary because it's probably the area that we see the most of. And then we're going to this big country over here just east of it, Romania, I guess when we're looking at it in size. maybe not a bad time to just kind of look at some of these major bodies of water, like the Black Sea over here, just to the east of Romania. But going from there, Romania to Bulgaria, just south of that, we're going to jump up to some of these areas here, like Slovenia, just shares the eastern border of Italy, and then we'll see how those can kind of run neck and neck with each other too sometimes. Underneath Slovenia, Croatia, more just discovering what's along the western coast here in the Adriatic Sea. And then we're going up north here to the Czech Republic and Slovakia. So many countries we're visiting, right? And then not on the map here, we'll go over to Lebanon and then Georgia, just because it's areas that we might see a little bit of today. And if we're able to highlight them in any class, now is the time to do that. Be kind of down over here to the southeast. So here we go. And I love this because my geography, it's true. It can be, I'd always have to review it a lot in school and stuff too, where it would just lose it. And wine really helps with that. But these are areas that we don't get to talk about as often. So I even like looking at this in the big picture of things and just kind of remembering their relation to each other, just this position on a map and whatnot too. Well, here we go. We're gonna begin in Hungary. Probably for one of the most historical, prized wines that we see out of all of these countries, given their history. And then just to have a focus specifically on Tokaj. So what we're doing up here is we're up in the northeastern part of the country, and the difference is, because you might see the spellings, Tokaj versus Tokaj with the I on the end. The difference is simply just that this is the geography or the geographical area, and then Tokaj would be referencing the wine itself. And it's at the confluence of two different rivers. It's the Tisza and the Bodrog rivers, and up against the Carpathian Mountains. So maybe a little bit higher on elevation, but also lending these volcanic soils, just a place in reference to where the vineyards sit along these mountain sites. And it's agriculture, right? We're always reminding that we're growing a grape somewhere. So we have this warm continental climate with these long, humid autumns, okay? And even though this is this continental climate then, where, you know, we have well-defined seasons, cool winter, warm summer, nice fall, and springtime, how they're able to grow grapes successfully is that the majority of vineyards are south-facing. So that means that they have the optimal or maximum amount of sun exposure to ripen grapes successfully, because we're still at a relatively cool area at the end of the day. But it's wonderful because with these humid autumns and the position by these rivers, there's moisture in the air. So what that really allows for here is the development of this botrytis affected grapes. And there's a few people that attend classes pretty regularly tonight, but botrytis, I think what we might be exposed to first is the wines of Sauternes in France in the Bordeaux region, maritime climate where these grapes are also affected by humidity and develop botrytis, which is a mold, it's a rot. It's a fungus that eats on the outside skins of the grape, essentially absorbing the water, bringing a higher concentration of sugars. It's like raisinating the fruit. But that allows you to make a sweet wine, because essentially you're making wine from raisins at this point. But botrytis is kind of cool because there are other ways that you could just like pick your grapes not affected by this mold, and you just let them dry out on straw mats and you raisinate the fruit that way. I think of something like, you know, Vinsanto from Tuscany. But botrytis actually brings flavors, this magic mold, this noble rot. And it's usually like ginger, saffron, honey. And if you're ever to blind taste like sweet wines, you're like, wow, where's this ginger, this saffron, this honey coming from? Well, I think it's from botrytis. And that's even true of dry wines. There's so many areas in the world where these grapes might be susceptible to this mold or this rot. But in this area, it works out really well for that development. But what's really cool is kind of fun why we have this date here, 1571. This is the first documentation of Azou grapes. Azou just means botrytis affected grapes. So when we're even talking about Sauternes, there isn't a definitive date that I've ever come across, but it's kind of like the early to mid 1800s where the first sauterne made from botrytis affected grapes really takes place. That's over 200 years from this initial starting point in 1571 that we see in Tokai. And another major area that they work or they make wine from these botrytis grapes is in Germany. And the very first documentation of botrytis affected grapes in Germany, which they also associate with like late harvest, because if you leave those grapes on the vine past September and October, it's more likely that it'll develop that mold. Well, the first time that happens in Germany is 1775. Again, here, Tokai, we're about 200 years before we even see this reference in Germany. So kind of cool its position here. And then even with this historical background, it's one of the very first regions that was ever like delimited, like recognized maybe officially. And what was kind of cool with this, well, here, I'll back up just because of how prized it was, the 17th century. King Louis the 14th. It's the wine king and the king of wines, but you know, they would, even in times of war, they would send their troops to protect these areas, to protect their wines so that there would always be wines ready and available for royalty at any time. But it was one of the more cherished wines throughout even the 1600s. But where I was getting to is this in 1700, this Prince Rakowski, he delimited 28 villages as a first, a second, and a third growth. Essentially, like, you can almost say like relating vineyards is a level of classification, right? First being the best, right? Kind of like Grand Cru, Premier Cru, maybe just recognized vineyards or something like that, okay? But this happened over 300 years ago. Next in line to that would be Tuscany with Chianti, now known as Chianti Classico, where that was officially delimited in the early 1700s as well, but I think it was like 1717, something like that. Here, Prince Rakowski beat out Chianti Classico. There was a classification that took place in 1730, but it was finally recognized legally in 1772, this first, second, third growth kind of thing. As we move along, as we see in a lot of these areas, the 20th century Iron Curtain closed the door. They were just affected by communist rule, where, you know, the idea was equality, but I think that what it meant to is poor quality. What it eventually landed in just mass-produced wines, again, at a lower quality. So we see that a lot, and then it really inhibited the growth and development to many of these countries that we're visiting. But at the fall of communism, and this is true too in many of these areas, you see these foreign investors, and then some of these producers that to know of, if you just love Tokai, Royal Tokai Company. If you're studying and you know Hugh Johnson, the Atlas and stuff, he was co-owner of this Royal Tokai Company, and it existed before all of this too, but they wanted to go back and reinvest in this name to preserve this historical state. And really fun, wonderful too, because Vega Sicilia, if you love your Spanish wines, one of the most prized producers of Ribera del Duero, Oremos is their efforts here in Tokai for these sweet botrytis affected wines. Diznoko and this Kiraldivar, right? This is Gaston Hewitt for your Chenin lovers of Vouvray. This is Gaston Hewitt's project. So it's kind of cool to see these notable people and then how they go in and invest after the fall of communism. You might hear of Tokai Renaissance. What that really is just these producers association that's devoted to the original 1700 Prince Rakowski delimited villages. So what they're trying to do is recognize these areas for grape growing and then maybe classifying it as, again, the first, second, or third growth. And so today what we see is 74 first growths. It's a lot of them. I don't remember too many of them ever, but the one that we kind of always brought to the attention is Sarvas and Mesas Meli. So one that you may find on a label. There's a few of us that have joined some of these 67 Pall Mall classes. It's this London British group. But this lady did a presentation on Hungary, and she had quite a few slides set aside specifically for this one first growth, Mesas Meli. that you could see with the vineyards and everything too. So just one of the more prized vineyard sites of Tokai. And what kind of grapes are they using to make these wonderful sweet botrytis wines? Ferment, probably one of the most prized. Second to that would be this Harslevelu. Okay, this is kind of cool. I believe it might be an Essentia bottle, which we'll learn about in a second, but just these stored, aged Tokai bottles, developing all this mold in the cellars. Kind of wild. Okay, so this is some label terminology. Pay attention. Because our next slide, I have a little practice on label reading. So we'll see how well we retain what's on the slide in front of us. Putoni, so what this is just this 25 kilogram container, and we can see it now on this gentleman with this pixelated face, what he's wearing on his backhand side. So when they're going through and picking these botrytis affected grapes, you often have to do it in tries. Like you go through once through the vineyards, you pick your botrytis affected grapes. And we can see it here. Look at that, that's crazy, right? But it affects the grapes at different times. So then you do that once, pick your grapes, you do it again, maybe a week or so later, and then you may do it a third or fourth or fifth try. It's a very labor intensive, costly practice. And that's why some of these wines can be so expensive, because you're hand picking all these grapes and you have to pay all these people to run through the vineyard so many times. So next to that is Essentia. So Putune, this is essentially just the barrel that they're filling up with botrytis grapes. Essentia. So once they bring in those botrytis grapes, before they crush it or before they press it, when those grapes are sitting in whatever vessel they're holding it in, you know, obviously the grapes on top will crush the grapes below. So there's free run juice. And there's not a lot of it, but there's a little. And what they use with that free run juice is to make this. And it's Essentia. It's just a fraction of the syrupy juice. That will sometimes take like 6 to 10 years just to ferment. And the highest it will ever get as far as levels of sugar, most dry wines, maybe 8 to 15% if we give it a nice broad scale. Here, only 4 to 6%. We had this one Hungarian winemaker, it actually might have been Austrian, no, it was a Hungarian winemaker, come to New York, and he was so excited because he brought one of his rare Essentia wines to share with us. And literally, you're putting this on a spoon just to have a mild taste of it, because there's not a lot of it that can be produced. And the fact that it takes almost 10 years just to make, you can see why this is so cherished. And this is the minimum sugar level, you guys. This is crazy. So when you have like a slightly sweet Riesling, it might be like 12 to 18 grams per liter of residual sugar. We start to perceive residual sugar at like 6 grams. I think Coca-Cola has something like 220 or something like that. It's been a little while since I checked. But this is like sweeter than drinking honey almost. This is Essentia. But again, it's just that free run juice from the grapes that are naturally crushed from the grapes that are on top. So really rare product. And then Gonki, what they do is, so this is the barrels that they'll traditionally use to make Tokai. Like in Burgundy, they'll use barriques that are about 228 liters. So a little bit larger in size, almost twice. In Bordeaux, and you've probably seen a lot of these because you might even see them in like Napa or something like that. It's about a 225 liter size barrel. So here's just a slightly smaller barrel, Gonki. But what they're using to make these Tokai sweet wines. So Azu, and these are these botrytis affected varietals. What they do, you guys, so they put, after they get that free run juice, they stamp the botrytis affected grapes, the Putoni. They press it down to like, I don't know, like not like a mash or something like that, but they stamp it down to like, almost like not like a brick or something like that, but they stamp it down. And then, depending on how many of these Putoni that they add to a Gonki will determine a level of sweetness. So how they used to label Tokai, Azu, sweet wines, would they maybe say 3 to 6 Putonis. So if you only add 3, these sweeter grapes, it won't be as sweet as if you had 6, much more of these botrytis affected grapes. So they've eliminated it now. So all you will see is Azu. Okay, so that's all you'll see after 2013 is azu, thank you, paste, on the label, right? Which is aged 2 years, 18 months in barrel, and then here we have 120 grams per liter of residual sugar, which is still quite a lot. So turn, it's about 45, okay? Going forth, but that's no longer permitted. This 3 to 6 plutonium was again eliminated in 2013, okay? Now what they also have, are we paying attention? Label reading, exercises soon to follow, Samarandi, as it comes. So this is simply a mixture of azu, botrytis affected, like what we have here, and just regular grapes that you see on a normal basis. It's often oxidative. That's just matured in these casks. Barrels are porous, so there's this exposure to oxygen. So they develop what is an oxidative characteristic. It's kind of like a dried fruit, like nuttiness, how that's oftentimes described. And then sometimes, which is really unique, that it's under a film forming yeast, similar to flora. So what you see in sherry, where it can be very, very nutty at times, okay? Samarandi as it comes. So it wouldn't be as sweet as what you would find with an azu, because some are botrytis, some are not. And then you might be seeing Edes or Saras, and that will just tell you that it's sweet, or if it's dry, Edes sweet, Saras dry, Edes is sweet. For Ditas and Maslas, so this is what you're doing is you're taking your wine, non-azu affected, or you are taking your azu affected grapes, and then you're re-fermenting it with a spent paste or spent lees of Tokai azu. So for Ditas, it would just be the re-fermentation of spent paste, maybe bringing in a little extra concentration of sweetness. I almost think of like ripasso in like Italy, if you love your Italian wines. Maslas, the re-fermentation of this wine with spent lees, which is just the leftover yeast, might just give you a little added texture and a little added richness. Maslas lees, maybe texture and richness. Or Ditas, re-fermenting with spent paste, which is the azu. Maybe a little extra sweetness to it. And then what we have here now is just a group of producers. Istvan Slevsky is one of them. He's the founder of this, that are just dedicated to the dry wines of Tokai, which we see more and more and more of. And you guys, if you want a crisp, bright, refreshing white, if you find like a ferment, oftentimes they're really crisp, light, and easy drinking. And you see more and more of it these days. Royal Tokai Company, which is wonderful. We see this producer here. They have one called Oddity that I see available at retail stores and whatnot. It probably is one of the ones that's more readily available. Royal Tokai. This is the Hugh Johnson wine. Their Oddity dry ferment. So he's actually just finishing the barrel. I think he's just toasting the insides. But this is a gonki. So you can see that it's relatively small. And then they would just add like 3 plutoni, 4 plutoni, 5, 6, and now it's really, really sweet because it's 6 plutoni. But why do they get to label it that way? Because it was before 2013, 2000, where they still were able to label it that way. Kuraludvar. So this is one of the first in international investment to these areas. I said his name so quickly, but this Istvan Slevsky, this founder of these Circle of Mad, he was also a co-founder of Kuraludvar, this producer here. And then remember Oremus? Chat. Does anybody remember the Spanish producer that helped establish Oremus? It's Vegas Sicilia, Ribeiro del Duero, right? But Edes, they're being nice to us because it actually tells the sweet. But Samarandi, you guys remember that a second ago? Is that going to be as sweet as the azu or less sweet? Probably less sweet because these are as it comes. It's a mix of botrytis and non-botrytis, where azu is all botrytis. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And then we have Forditas, right? Do you remember that? The re-fermentation of this wine with a spent paste to maybe bring extra sweetness, right? And then we also have Maslas. Here, the re-fermentation with the spent lees. Remember that? Right over here, Maslas, to perhaps give a little extra texture and roundness. And then, Edes or sweet, we kind of got our cheat. We know, without ever having tasted this wine, The edis means sweet, okay? So if that helps. And then wonderful here, where we see this essentia. Gosh, you come across different spellings, even from different resources, right? But now remember, that's just that free run juice that takes sometimes 6 to 10 years to ferment, where it's incredibly rare. I mean, you don't see a lot of these wines on, mini wine lists, but if you look even at 11 Madison Park or something like that, they have a strong list of essentia wines, and some of them going back to the early 1900s, which is absolutely crazy. And they're like a 500 milliliter bottle and can run close to like $900, $800 sometimes, to put it in practical terms. But now, once we get outside of Tokai, our wonderful sweet wines, well, what the heck else is going on? We have about 31 appellations, 6 PGIs. PGIs are just broader, looser geography designated areas with looser regulations. But I don't think that's something we need to worry about too much so far. I think this might help us kind of condense things a little bit. There's 3 major zones, and essentially it's North Hungary. It's everything really on this western side, which is Transdanubia, and then there's what's over here is the Great Plain. So North Hungary, Transdanubia, and then the Great Plain, okay? Now, besides our Tokai, what we have also up here in North Hungary is this Eger, okay? And what Eger is really known for is actually red wines, and it's this Egri Biegever, which means bull's blood of Eger. Historically, some of the main grapes that went into this red bull's blood of Eger was Kadarka. Okay, and you see this varietal planted in a lot of areas throughout the Eastern Europe. Light body, low tannins, can be very easy drinking. We had one from, it was right underneath, well, anyway, I'll get back to that later, but yeah, it was almost really refreshing. It was almost kind of like a Pinot Noir, which is kind of weird in that way. Maybe a little bit riper than that, but it was really easy drinking and light and pretty. But these days, it's usually based off of a blend of 4 grapes, Keck Frankos, Blaufränkisch. You see a little bit in New York, might be labeled as Lemberger or Blaufränkisch, but it's really just one of the main grapes of Austria. So just right over here. So you see the relation to its neighboring countries. So much information, right? This is kind of funny. How does it get this name bull's blood then? So supposedly these Turkish warriors were coming in to start battle with these Hungarians, and coming upon them, they discovered all these Hungarians with bloodshot eyes and red-stained beards, where they were totally drunk off this Kadarka. But upon seeing this, all these Turkish warriors or soldiers, when retreated, reporting to their general saying that we can't mess with these Hungarians. They were drinking bull's blood, where this all comes from, okay? But sometimes it can be a little rustic and savory. I think some of the examples of Keck Frankos, the historical varietal has been pretty light and easy. Transdanubia, okay. The other area where you can actually make this bull's blood, this Biegever, is Sexgard. So if it's not up here in Eger, it's down here, where it's a little bit warmer, okay? Versus 4 grapes up here, we can only use 3 down below. Similar to Pinot Noir, it's slightly fuller than that, and I think you come across different examples just depending on the winemaking. But light, fresh, maybe wines that are producers that you might come across with low intervention. There's not a lot, but it can be relatively easy drinking. I say maybe a slightly fuller, maybe slightly more tannic Pinot Noir, but certainly nothing like a cab on most examples that I've seen. Just referring to the chat. Thanks, Sheila. But 3 grapes as opposed to the 4 over here. But the other areas that we really need to learn about, you see this area here in the center. This is Lake Balaton. And there's a couple major regions around Lake Balaton, one of the largest lakes in Eastern Europe. And that's what we have here is Badagasny and Blatensfjord Silpak. And sitting on these volcanic soils, even Somo, north of that, a little bit away, not on the direct border of Lake Balaton, we have white varietals here, such as Ferment, Ufark, Last Riesling, which is simply Welsh Riesling, and we're going to see a lot of that here, but on a dry style. What I have here is this Herzegovina, one of the main grapes for ferment, but it's grown over here in Somo, spelled a little differently here on the label. These grapes can be really bright, really dry, and very acidic. This Herzegovina that we've had on our list from Apasagi, the producer, it actually retained a little, they kept it with a little bit of its original residual sugar. The reason why is because that little bit of residual sugar complemented this bright, acidic Herzegovina that you get in these relatively cool areas of Trans-Danubia. But what the heck is going on Lake Balaton? Dry, crisp whites based off of ferment. We've had Euphorks on our list, and yes, we will come across some Welsh Rieslings from time to time. Vlani down here in the south, why we should know about that is Hungary's hottest region. And if you love Bordeaux, maybe you'll come across a Bordeaux varietal here from time to time. But what I think they're focusing on more, or maybe more unique to the area, is Kek Francos, which is simply Blau Frankish. Keko Porto, Blau Portuguese. You guys, Blau Frankish is again one of the main grapes in, well, not only Bikaver these days, but also in Austria. It's like a lighter Syrah. It can be smoky and savory and meaty, kind of peppery sometimes. And there can be some dark fruit to it, but because these are still at the end of the day, maybe not areas that aren't nearly as warm as like Napa or Barossa or somewhere like that, there's still a freshness to them, okay, if that makes a little bit sense. But usually there's a savory quality to them, kind of peppery and smoky. White wines over here near Lake Balaton, warm regions in the south where we get some wonderful reds. And the last area to focus on is Sopron, and that's right up over here on the border of Austria. And in this area of Austria, even though it's known for whites, in this middle area, this is where they really focus on Blaufränkisch. And we all know the Hungarian name for Blaufränkisch is simply Kek Francos. Lastly, you guys, and then we're going off to our other countries. What you see here in this big area, this is Kunzak, but this is a part of the Great Plains. Essentially, this is just like easy everyday consumption. We don't see a lot of it exported, but an area that has a lot of sandy soils. When you hear about phylloxera and people had to replant their vineyards after this huge crisis that took place in the 1800s, this is an area that was never really affected because phylloxera isn't able to really survive on these hot sandy soils. So it's an area that was able to see a lot of success after like phylloxera and whatnot too, but it's just everyday quality. And we are on a vacation, right? Thanks for listening. Some pictures, right? So this is Tokaj, and we're looking down from the vineyards. I'm not sure if this is the Tisza or the Bodrog River, but I'm sure that is one of them. Again, one of these two major rivers that create this humid environment. Wonderful for botrytis. And then this is Vlani. You guys, what's the warmest region in all of Hungary? Vlani. So red varietals like Bordeaux, and then even Kek Francos down here. Okay, so we're going from Hungary now down to Romania. You guys, even though we're being exposed to all of these things, even when I look up to what's available on most of our vendor websites and stuff too, there's only like one or two wines from Romania that appear to be available for us. We actually had this really cool Transylvania ice wine like a year or so ago that we had for winter, and Alois Crocker, this wonderful producer from Austria, was partnering with this producer in Transylvania to make this ice wine, but unfortunately just don't see a lot of it. But we're here to tackle what's going on and maybe what we should know. So yes, behind the iron curtain, quantity and poor quality, common message throughout. At this time, it was this expansion of vineyard acreage in the mid 20th century where people moved away maybe from indigenous varietals to these hybrids that were resistant to frost and disease that they could plant successfully and produce a lot of pretty quickly. And then it was usually overrun by these huge cooperatives. But here we had the fall of communism in 1989. So it was this big movement towards privatization, private ownership, and a refocus on quality. And even though, so they had all these vineyards planted during this communist rule for bulk production, when they started trimming back the vineyards in this effort towards quality, more prized vineyard sites, better for quality grape growing. Romania as a whole still, even today, even with this reduction of vineyards, is one of the most widely planted areas in all of Eastern Europe. I think it's like number 16 in production. Like, you know, Hungary is like 13th in world production. Romania is like 16. Bulgaria is like 21. This goes back and forth, but lots going on over here. But most of it is just drank locally. There's only 15% of it that's exported. Wow, we don't see a lot of it. What are the two main white grapes? Well, someone was drinking the Fetiesca Niagara, right? Not the, yep, exactly. But for the white grapes, and these are the most planted in all of Romania, it's Fetiesca Alba and Fetiesca Regala. Just crisp, bright, easy drinking, wonderful, refreshing whites. I've heard that Fetiesca Alba might be a little bit more aromatic, a little bit more tropical or floral. This might be a little bit more mineral, from what I've read. Again, we don't get to try a lot of this stuff. And then this is a common name. Again, Welsh Riesling appears again here in Romania. And then we see this mix of international varietals. When these people were coming back, or these countries were coming back from communistic rule, a way that they could promote themselves is selling wines or planting grapes that they know they would sell, such as the acclaimed Cabernets and Merlots and Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays and Sauvignon Blancs and Pinot Grigios. So that's why we see a lot of it today. But I think as these areas are developing, there's more of a focus on indigenous grapes with a historical presence, because I think that's what people are being turned on to. And I think that's what really makes it unique. But how they got to be recognized is this more recognizable, they call it international plantings. And then there's some of the red grapes if we're looking at it. Bulgaria's Pinimid, so we're going to see that in a second. It's just easy drinking, early harvesting, super light, probably like a light Pinot Noir. This Rossiaro, it's just like everyday table wines. So this is just a quick look at wine laws, you guys. There's two major categories. They were officially established in 2002. If you look at like French AOCs or Italian DOCs, here Romania established their wine laws in 2002. Essentially, there's wines for current consumption, table wines, VM and VMS, superior table wine, regular table wine, but just everyday consumption, okay? Quality wines is the second of these two major tiers. And within the quality wines designation, you might see VS, which is just like an IGP. That's like our stepping stone category. Broader geographic designation, looser regulations, more plain room. And then the top tier, the more specific DOC. And these have to follow certain varietals that have been authorized along with recommended. And then it has to come from one of these 7 major regions, okay? I'm gonna go through them right now. Moldova, we have Muntenia, Oltenia, Banat, Cristiana, Maramuras, high altitude, kind of like plateau of Transylvania. And then we also have this Dobrosia Hills, or Hills of Dobrosia over here near the Black Sea, okay? So it has to come from one of these 7 major regions in order to be one of these top tiers, okay? And probably has to be like a Fetiesca Regala or a Fetiesca Alba, right? It has to follow certain varietals. And within this DOC, this top tier, you might see CMD, CT, CIB. Essentially would just tell you that it's a fully mature grape, a late harvest grape, or a botrytis affected grape. And then what defines this region geographically? I like it that we can see it here, the Carpathian Mountains, the center where we can see Transylvania, and then all of these other 5-6 regions that surround it, almost like a donut. And then we have the Danube River down below, the Black Sea here to the east. So here in Moldavia, this is where most production takes place. The area that we should know about is Kotnari for its historical reference, and they really were known for these sweet wines similar to Tokai or like a Sauterne. But again, when we're looking up to see what's even available, there's only like 2 producers that we see on, vendor distribution sites. So not a lot of it. If you happen to come across it, it could be a really, really cool thing to try. And the main grape that would go into this Kotnari, which you see over here, is this Grassa de Cortinari. You can use some of these other grapes like Francusa or Tamayosa or Romanesca. This unique, which is supposed to be uniquely fragrant. And again, we see Fettiasca Alba. So you can blend that with the main grape, Grassa, or you could just have it varietally by itself. Just wondering what our laws of production are, okay, but the main one is Grassa. Again, we just don't see a lot of it. Sweet wines, northeastern Romania, Moldova, Cortinari is the thing to remember. More of a historical reference. The Yellow Mare here, this is in the south, kind of in the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains. See more red wine productions, and it could be a focus of like Cabernet or Pinot Noir. Jancis Robinson, one of the most celebrated publishers of wine, she's like, yeah, sometimes you have this wonderful potential, but then sometimes we might drink reds that are almost like soupy-like in quality. And I'm only saying that is because these are areas that, again, are just, they're not quite fully established. They're rebuilding themselves a little bit, but maybe more red wines over here. We'll skip past these areas, but not in Crisano Maramuras, because there might not just be overall a lot going on over here, especially what's available to us. But if we head over to the eastern side, and these hills of Dobroja by the Black Sea, again, maybe a little bit of a focus on reds, like Cab and Pinot Noir, kind of cool, some light harvest Chardonnay. And then Transylvania, wooded hills of the Carpathian Mountains on this plateau. It's one of the coolest regions. And what do we get in these wonderful, cool regions? Crisp, dry whites from these Fettiasca grapes. Crisp whites, reds, and sweet wines. Cool. High volume, inexpensive white Moldova. Oh, well, yeah, what grape is used? It probably would be something like even like a Miller Turgau or something like that. And again, I don't even really see a lot of it, but I'd imagine that for bulk wines, it would be something of a hybrid. And I think Miller Turgau pops its head up quite a bit around here, same way that it did with Germany. But it wouldn't be something that would probably be like a Fettiasca Alba or something like that. Just again referring to my chat with Jeff. Okay, Bulgaria. So we're underneath Romania. Kind of interesting their history where in the 1970s and 1980s, the world's fourth largest exporter of wine. A lot of it was going to Russia and a lot of it was going to the United Kingdom, like England and whatnot too, where all of this is going. There was a lot of collaboration here too, and they made an agreement even with the Pepsi Cola company. In exchange for buying cola, they would in turn receive education on wine growing. This is through the Pepsi Cola company in the 1980s, which is just weird. But it's also kind of cool because they collaborated a lot with UC Davis, where they had an influence. UC Davis based out in California, where a lot of people go and get their ethnology backgrounds or winemaking education. But how that lended to and just the general styles is that you started to see these more fruit-forward Cabernets, similar to what you would even see in like California, but how they were even able to build recognition and production from these more recognized Cabernet, like fruit-forward styles that took place in Bulgaria. And this name of the game all throughout. 1985, Gorbachev he establishes these anti-alcohol reforms. So wonderful, we're being successful, but now here it drops quite a bit. But as that comes to an end, as far as the collapse of the communist regime, again, we have the success in New World style. You can have a control around. It's just recognized area, a recognized appellation within a designated, within a DGO. So it's kind of like a pre-recruit, this control line. And combining these two categories together, you have a total of 52, okay? 5 larger zones. Oops. 5 larger zones. The Danubian Plains here to the north, Thracian lowlands. These are the 2 only official appellations recognized by the EU, Danubian Plains and the Thracian lowlands. We also have this Black Sea region, again over here to the east, remembering the Black Sea is just to the east of us. Struma River Valley, down below, and then Rose Valley in the center, okay? But we'll try to remember Danubian Plain, Thracian lowlands, Black Sea region. I'll just say it again, Struma River Valley and then Rose Valley. Again, we don't see a lot of it. Melnek here. This is one of the producers that we actually had on our list. this Orbellus, okay? Melnick, remember this, okay? So we're gonna look at some of these major varietals. If you see a Brique on the label, it just tells you that it was aged in oak cask or fermented in oak cask 500 liters or less, okay? Just age designations I'll probably skip by. Well, I'm not. Reserve 1 year, special selection is 2 years, if you happen to see that. But besides, again, our common thread here, Cabernet Merlot is these recognized international varietals. What makes Bulgaria unique and what we might see more of? Gamza, which is simply Kadarka, remember, our historical varietal used for bull's blood. Mavrud, they haven't, I don't think, tied it specifically to Mourvedre, if you're wondering, but it's a darker skinned grape that usually lends a lot more color to it. So just a darker in concentration and drinks a little bit fuller. Mavrud. Melnick, Tannic, exclusively from this river, this region of the Strumer River Valley. So we know that, or Bellis to make Melnick, we know that is only planted down here in the Strumer River Valley. Pomed, that's our thin skin varietal for everyday consumption. I know we've already thrown out a lot of names, but if you remember Rosiara from Romania, same varietal. Just easy drinking, everyday consumption. And when they're developing a lot of these hybrids, this is kind of fun. Ruben, it's a crossing of Nebbiolo and Syrah. Kind of interesting. When we get to Georgia towards the end, one of the more planted grapes of that country, Costatelli is one of the main ones that we see here in Bulgaria, along with this Dimiat, which I haven't really ever seen anywhere else. And because we're looking at varietals, red muscat, it is a white varietal, it's aromatic, but even though it sounds like that, there is no relation to Muscat. You guys, you'll see Costatelli even in the Finger Lakes region. You'll see people planting to it. So I better keep myself on track. Slovenia, okay, so here we are. This is Italy. Just on the western side to what's over here. There are 3 major regions. Primorska over here next to Italy. There's Podrave, which is the largest in production, usually focused on white wines, Welsh Riesling, Gewürztraminer, regular Riesling, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon Blanc. But not too far away from these other cool climate regions that also focus on these grapes. But Primorska, sharing this border of Italy, which is really kind of fun because you'll see areas of Friuli using the same grapes that they use over here in Primorska of Slovenia. Some of them simply being, for red varietals, Riffosk or Riffosk is in Slovenia. Fosco is the name when you cross the border into Italy. Ribolla or Ribolla Gialla can be like a slightly more aromatic or a textured Pinot Grigio. But if you look at CV Pinot, which you see here, and you know that it's from Slovenia, it's Pinot Grigio. I was looking at our chat. So this is just CV Pinot, is simply Pinot Grigio from this area. And then there are producers, one of them, Movia, that you see here, where it almost ignores these geographic boundaries and these borders, because half of his vineyards are actually located in Friuli, where he has to go and harvest those grapes every year. And that's true, like his counterpart in Friuli is Jasko Grabner in Italy. So even Jasko Grabner has to cross over to Slovenia to pick some of his like Ribolla Gialla or Fosco too. These vineyards overlap in these 2 countries' borders. Again, we don't see a lot of Podrave as far as that. It's more just like easy everyday consumption. But know that this is white wines over here, okay? And then Posave, again, just white wine production, I think at the end of the day, but the least amount as far as all 3 regions, okay? So yeah, I'm gonna just say that again real quick. Italian influence, white wines, smallest in production. Okay, so here we are in Croatia. We're just gonna go right underneath Slovenia. A lot of what we see are coming from the western coast over here, and we have Istria to the north and Dalmatia to the south, okay? Overall, just dedicated towards white wine production, although we got some really cool reds over here. Hey, what's the major grape? Welsh Riesling, but as it takes these different names, in Croatia it's known as Grasafina, okay? So if you see Grasafina, you know that's just Welsh Riesling. Again, it's just like a slightly more expressive, like easy drinking Pinot Grigio, maybe a little more mineral if you had to describe. But what we see here, we see Plavak here, and then we see Plavak Mali over here. This is the grape, Plavak Mali, and it's a red varietal. It's one of the more planted ones in all of Croatia, and it means little blue fruit. And I always get this like almost blueberry-like quality to it. And I think maybe even suggested to the name of itself. But you don't really see it anywhere else. It is a descendant. Well, actually here, what's besides Plavik Mali or little blue fruit, and besides Welsh Riesling, which is known as Grosvenor, the other major claim to fame here is that this grape, see if you can pronounce that before I say it, Surlina Kastelanski. Well, that is just simply Zinfandel. And it's kind of cool because Mike Gergich, who you see Gergich wines out in Napa Valley, but he was the sole winemaker for Chateau Montelena when they won first place on the Judgment of Paris, just because I know there's a few of you that are a little more familiar with wine here, but kind of cool. His place in Napa Valley, well, he's originally from Croatia, and it was just upon what he recollected in memory that eventually drove this Carol Mera to discover that lineage between Surlina Kastelanski and Zinfandel. So they're the same grape. It was just Mike Gergich remembering that. So review. 2 major areas, Istria, Dalmatia, most of it's on the western coast, mostly white wines, Grosvenor, Welsh Riesling, but we might find our little blue fruit Plavik, and we might find Zinfandel, but with this tongue twister name of Surlina Kastelanski. These are both producers we've had on our list before. Nico Burra, he's been around since like the 1600s, long time. I bet even 1400s, but one of the standout producers of the area. Now we're going up north. Czech Republic and Slovakia. So you guys, both of these, you might see them listed in like the same of what you might find on a German wine label, meaning that it could be like Cabernet, Spätlese, Auslese, Baron Auslese, Trocken Baron Auslese. They use that in Slovakia, and they use that in the Czech Republic too to indicate the level of sweet wine. But other than that, they're trying to follow something similar to what they have in France or even Austria, like this appellation like AOC or DAC, whatever. If you follow it that way, it's just a slightly different weight scale. They just call it the Czechoslovak normalized must weight scale. I'm just going to leave it at that, but just understand that there's a similar levels of sweetness. I probably won't spend so much time on this too, because it's just like, oh my gosh, stop. But well, I will. Malokarpatska, Južnoslovanskia. This is one of the largest regions. Južnoslovanskia is one of the warmest regions. Nitrianska, this is one that you'll see a lot of variety. Again, we don't see a lot, okay, but I'm just trying to decipher between the 6 of these, which is what we could say. Stratoslovenskia, it's just a volcanic soils that typify this area. They say a lot of the wines from Vicoro, Slovanska can be very aromatic. It's how this region is generally distinguished. And Tokaj, it actually was a part of the southern region of Tokaj. It's a shared region, but now with its own denomination in Slovakia. And they make sweet wine similar to that, and it follows the same regulations that you would see in the Hungarian region of Tokaj, just right below. I don't know, you guys, if you're ever trying to memorize these, and I don't know why you would be, but just think of like Južnoslovanskia, Stratoslovenskia, and Vikoslovenskia, all on the southern border. And when we're looking at the country as a whole, most wine production taking place in the south, if that makes sense. You guys, again, this is one of the producers that we've actually been able to buy, and it's a really cool distributor importer. Slobodny is the name of the wine, but we had this cool skin contact wine made by this unique grape called Devner. I'm a totally natural winemaking. Didn't release it as any of these denominations, but was based out of this this village called Turney down below, the Slobodny. I don't know, if you're in the city, this is something that you might come across, and it might be something you could discover in like a natural wine bar. And that's just what this is true too. As we move up to the Czech Republic from Slovakia, here, there's 2 major wine regions. Up over here is Bohemia, and this is bordering Germany, and it's right across from this region of Sachsen. If you like German wines, it's on the same latitude as Rheingau, but crisp, dry whites, cool climate. Wonderful for white wine growing and making, right? But down here in the southeastern part, this is where we see 96% of the country's vineyards. And this is in Moravia down here below, okay? And then this is right next to Germany. This is right above Austria in this larger Weinviertel area. And what is one of the major grapes in Austria? Gruner Veltliner. So that's actually what this is right here, this Milan Nestrock. Forks over knife, it's this particular bottling where it's a Gruner Veltliner. So that's just like every once in a while, we always want a Gruner Veltliner to pour by the glass and stuff for guests. If we don't have one from Austria, sometimes we might bring in one from the Czech Republic, which is kind of fun. And as these regions are starting to be demarcated, the one that's most prominent is this one's Nomo. Okay, and there are rules and regulations to this Nomo. It's called a VOC. It's actually a voluntary system where it has to be 3 varietals. It's either Gruner Veltliner, Sauvignon Blanc, or it's Riesling. So you'll never see a wine listed as Zone Nomo, unless it's these 3 varietals: Gruner Veltliner, Riesling, or Sauvignon Blanc. But crisp, refreshing whites. That's true with all these. You guys, Modre Ori, this is actually based off of red and rosé. Blatness is also white wine production over here. Plava, this is all Welsh Riesling. Just a little bit into the insight of these other appellations. And then Bohemia up over here, Müller-Thurgau, Frankowka, Blaufränkisch. Some of these, again, Austrian varietals like St. Laurent and Riesling Slavsky. All right, we did it. I'm always worried about time. Lebanon. Is it a part of Eastern Europe? Maybe not. We could probably say Eastern Mediterranean. But when we look at its history, it's just because we might see a couple producers, and again, a wonderful chance to touch on this country as a whole. Ancient Phoenicia, which would essentially cover North Israel, Lebanon, and then southern Syria as this ancient region. But along with the Greeks, and prior to the Greeks, they were the ones that really spread viticulture throughout the Mediterranean, southern Italy, northern Africa, even as far as Jerez of southern Spain. For those who like sherry, Phoenicians were the first to establish that area. 1517 Ottoman Empire expanded into Lebanon. So here under Islamic rule, where wine wasn't legally permitted, but it did exist under certain pockets of Christian religion. But anyway, here 1857, the beginning of modern wine industry, Jesuit missionaries to establish the Chateau Sarah, which is today Lebanon's largest producer, although it wasn't releasing wines commercially when it first established. What was releasing wines commercially when first established? Lebanon's oldest winery, Domaine de Tourelle, right over here, which is kind of cool. And then it was after, for a period of time after World Wars, it was occupied by French occupation, but then it eventually declared its independence. Then we saw Civil War. At this time in the 70s, there's only 4 wineries that existed: Sarah, Chateau Moussard, Domaine de Tourelle, and this Nakad. Here we go, you guys. This Serge Hochar, and if you love wines from Lebanon, you probably are familiar with Chateau Moussard, but we're going to look at him in a second. He brought these wines to this Bristol Wine Fair, and there's Michael Broadbent. He's kind of like a Robert Parker, but he was the first, like, oh my God, these wines are amazing, and there's this huge critical acclaim, and all of a sudden this international attention now kind of spotlighted on the wines from Lebanon, thanks to Serge Hochar and Chateau Moussard. And even during this period of the Civil War, he made wine out of every single vintage when these vineyards were being bombed and whatnot too, only missing one. So it's kind of wild that he continued to produce wines during this period of Civil War, just showing a level of dedication that this particular beloved producer had. There's only 50 wineries today, so not a lot, right? There's no formal appellation system. If we're looking at the Bekaa Valley, it's formed by 2 major mountain ranges: Mount Lebanon, blocks from humidity; Anti-Lebanon, kind of fun, but it protects from the desert heat. We're at the end of the day, we're sitting at a relatively high elevation. I'm going to show you a picture here in a second. Some new producers are getting away from Bekaa Valley, the major area that we should be familiar with. Up in here to Batroun for new producers establishing themselves up over here. Within the Bekaa Valley, one of the most prized regions is this West Bekaa down below. And if it's not international Bordeaux, Rhone, or French influence, again, having that exposure to French occupation, Obeda and Merwa that you see by Serge Hoshar. That's him. He passed away a few years ago, but had been recognized by Decanter Wine Magazine previously as Winemaker of the Year. But it was his dedication, and even having learned from the best of Bordeaux, he partnered up with Chateau Lévaux-Barton. He was a war buddy with that guy, and then well, it was his father that was, and then Serge, again, his father established this estate, being inspired by this gentleman from Chateau Lévaux-Barton in the early 1930s. Serge is the second generation who we see here, had learned from this world celebrated Bordeaux consultant called Emile Pinot, took this training, and then after years of experience kind of went left field, and what was very technical in its education become very hands-off and low intervention, and just how he followed the vineyards and the winemaking, which he thought was the best move for the healthiest styles of wines. So they're usually based off of Cabernet. So if you love Bordeaux or like Napa Cabs, you should really check out some of the wines from Musar. And if you like rich whites, this is when he's using these indigenous varietals like Obeda and Merwa, which have been compared to like Chardonnay and Semillon. But he even describes his whites as being some of his richest reds, where they're really rich, they're really textured, they're golden in colored, and they're just like nutty and golden tree fruit and absolutely wonderful. You need a terrific cheese wine or something like that, check out the Chateau Musar whites. And then this is our Domaine Tourelle, our oldest commercial winery in Lebanon, established in 1868. And then this is a picture of the Bekaa Valley. And even Serge Hoshar, he has these old bush vines. They're not trained or anything like that. Essentially, it's just, again, like a wild bush vine. And then I know we're at 732. Lebanon, it's kind of like it's high elevation, but still like a relatively continental climate. You could almost say like a Mediterranean influence. But it's relatively warmer. I mean, it's where you can ripen these red varietals like Cabernet and whatnot pretty successfully, and where if you're growing whites, you can end up with relatively ripe styles as well. Sorry, I'm drinking a little bit. Oh, sorry, I'm getting carried away on our chat. But here, you guys, Georgia, on the eastern side of Black Sea, maybe if we just crossed over from Bulgaria, some of these major grapes are Casatelli, crisp white, Saporevi. You guys, most juice in red wines is clear. It only gets the color from sitting with the skins of the red grape. It's like steeping a tea bag. The clear juice inherits the red color from the red skins. But Saporevi is a Tintorio varietal, so the juice is actually red. So sometimes it has this soft, lush, like fruit quality to it, and I think even to the fact that the juice of this varietal is actually red. Most of these have been pretty approachable. They can almost be like a Grenache sometimes. So if you have never tried them before, it's worth checking out. And then you can look at a Georgian wine label. So you know that these would just be the grapes. Kevri, this is what we see here. It's these large amphora pots buried deep underground. It's a traditional historic way of making wines that you'll even see people from Friuli or other folks that are interested in orange wines getting their amphora pots, these Kevri from Georgia. But yeah, this is where it all began, you guys. Supposedly, you hear little stories. Jeff and I were talking about it earlier, but this is the earliest evidence of viticulture going back 8,000 years ago in 6,000 BC. And what they do is they just throw all the juice with the skins, the stems, the seeds, and then they just leave it there. And all the skins and the stems and the seeds, they act as a preservative, but essentially then they just go and they scoop it out of those vessels, and then that's what makes the wine. So you see a lot of orange wines coming from here, again, as an historical product. And sometimes orange wines, they can be really light and friendly. What we see a lot from Georgia can be really rustic and almost brown and super golden in color sometimes. And as far as major areas of production, thanks for staying tight with me for these 5 minutes. It's Kartli, Katketi, Imereti. We see the others here, but I would say most of what is available to us, and as far as scale production is over here. Okay, awesome. Well, you guys, thanks for staying. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. We'll bring everybody up, unmute us, or I don't know, or unmute yourself here. There we go. But thanks, y'all. I know that's a lot to cover, and I know that was like a lot of like a lot of different varietals that we don't usually hear on a regular basis, and a lot of different regions that we don't hear on a regular basis. And when they have these kinds of intimidating names, I can imagine it might just wash right over you a little bit. But I hopefully had a couple takeaways. If anything else, you know, if you're in the Czech Republic, you might find some crisp, refreshing whites, right? In Slovenia, you might see an influence of Italian varietals, even like Pinot Grigio or Ribolla Gialla, or even like Refosk, absolutely right. Romania, if you come across it, it's probably a crisp, refreshing wine at the end of the day, although you can find some wonderful sweet wines. And then even backtracking to Hungary, well, we know about Tokai, like similar to Sautern, but it beats them all as far as these sweet botrytis affected wines. And then you might find like Blaufränkisch and things like that as far as the reds, if anything else. But all right, I guess we can just stop there. Thank you, everybody. If anybody has any questions, I can certainly stay on for a little bit, but I can let everybody go too if you're ready, so you can enjoy the rest of the weekend. And
Well said. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks as
Thanks,
always.
Ryan. Very cool.
I'll appreciate it. And no, have a nice weekend. Yeah, just if we don't cover something now, just let me know in an email when we send out the slides, all right? All right. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.